In this video for Herb Computer Science, we're going to take a look at updating our Snake game. Somebody posted a comment asking how we can add a Windows form to our C# project. So we're going to do that, creating a main menu, calling a different form. They also wanted to know, can we implement a high scoring system where the high score is recorded? So we'll be doing that too. On the main menu screen, what we're going to do is we're going to give them three buttons. One button to start the Snake game, another option or button to see the high score so they can view that in any time, and another option to exit the game. Right now when our Snake game ends, it says game over, you collided with the wall. When we hit OK, the project closes down. What we need to do is take the score, which is in this case is 10, and compare it to the existing high score. If 10 is higher than the current high score, then we're going to update the file with the name and the new high score. But the first thing we need to do is create that main menu form. So let's learn how to do that right now. To add a Windows form to your project, it does matter where you click. For example, if I click on my solution and I go to add, notice I don't have an option for a Windows form. Even if I click on new item, there's not an option here for a Windows form. So what I want to do is I want to click on my project name. Mine is called ECS Snake Eater. I'm going to right click and notice now I have a bunch of different options. I can go to add and now I can see the Windows form. That's going to bring up this screen and it wants me to give it a name. So right here, make sure it's on form, Windows form, and we're going to call ours FRM. That's the abbreviation for form main menu. And we're going to hit add and that's going to bring up our new form. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this. Now notice the text will be the same as the name. We're going to click on properties and we're going to change that text to just main menu. Any user using it is not going to have a clue what FRM refers to unless they're a programmer as well. If you need to switch back to your other one, all you're going to do is double click on that other form and it brings up. That's how you're going to switch back and forth between these. It'll also be up here on the toolbar that you have. What we need to do is we need to add three buttons. So I'm going to open my toolbox, double click those buttons three times. The first thing I need to do is I need to rename all these buttons. So I'm going to scroll up to the very top with my properties. I'm going to call the first one BTN Start Game. And what that will do is it will load the other form where our game is. The second button is going to be View High Score. So it's going to be BTN View High Score. And then the last one is going to be to exit. So BTN exit. What we need to do next is, of course, change all those text. The user doesn't know what button 1, 2, and 3 does, so we want to give it a text property so the user knows what they actually do. So make sure we're on our properties here. We said the second one is View High Score, and then our first one is Start Game. And then we'll need to review or resize these buttons a little bit here. There we go. So Start Game. And then we have exit and we can update those. So the first thing we need to learn to do is when we click on Start Game, how do we load the Snake game? How do we do that? So let's learn how to do that right now. We're going to double click this Start Game button. This is where we're going to write code to switch forms. Now, in order to switch forms, we need to create an instance of that form. So I'm going to scroll up here, and right here in my public partial class, because I'm creating an instance of an object, I'm going to use the keyword private. Yes, we don't have to use it. It'll do it by default, but it's to make our code more easy to read. And when other programmers look at it, they say, hey, we're creating an instance of a class here. Form 1 game. Notice form 1 has a red line. It says it can't be found. What does it mean it can't be found? I'm looking right here. It says form 1. This is why it's so important you want to understand your code so when you run into unexpected errors like this, you're able to fix them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on my form 1. Brings up the form that we're looking for, but is it really called form 1? I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to click properties. When I scroll up to the top or I look at the top, notice it's not called Form 1, it's called FRM main. For some reason, when we renamed it, it didn't save that to the Solution Explorer. It's still called Form 1 in the Solution Explorer, but the Visual Studio knows that Form 1 doesn't exist because it knows it as FRM main. So I'm going to go back to my main menu. I'm going to scroll, close this properties, scroll back up, and I know form 1, the computer doesn't know what that is, but it does know what form main is. And I'm going to call it game. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and create an instance, game equals new frm main, and now I can use those methods. So right here in BT and start game, I'm going to do game.show. That will bring that game form to the foreground, and I'm going to do this dot hide. I want to hide the main menu. I don't want it to show. Now, before you go ahead and hit start to see if this is going to run, it's not actually going to load the main menu. Well, why is that? How do we get it to load the main menu? It's going to load whatever form you created first, which in this case was FRM main. When we made the sync game, we didn't have a main menu. Because we're implementing that now, we need to change which form loads first. You'll see this C# program file. Double click on it. And we're looking for this line of code right here, the application.run. It says new FRM main. That's going to be the form that loads first. We want FRM main menu to load first. Now when we click start, it will load the main menu. So we click on start. We see our main menu loads, but something very interesting happens. Before I can even hit start game, game over. You collided with the wall. And it exits out. Why is that happening? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to form 1, and right here, it's this line of code that starts running. Here, we've initialized everything. Up here, we've set everything up, but it's this line of code where we turn the timer on that starts the game. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to cut this, and we're going to put this in the FRM main load. I'm going to paste it in there. So now when the form loads, it will execute that timer update start. So we run our program again. We see it brings up the main menu. We'll give it a few seconds to make sure the snake isn't going to collide into the wall. That's because the timer hasn't actually started. By now, it would have hit the wall. When I hit start game, it brings up that form, and notice the snake or the timer has actually turned on, and now I can play the game. The next thing we need to do is go back to the main menu. So we're going to go back to our main menu here, and we're going to do the view high score. And if there's not an existing high score file, we're going to go ahead and create one. So let's double click view high score. So we have some variables that we're going to be starting with. We have name, because we need to be able to retrieve the name from the file. We need a score. Now, do you have to set equal to 0? Absolutely not. You can just do score. That'll be 0 by default. A score file, that needs to be a string, because when I'm reading it from the file, it's actually going to be a string. I'll need to convert it to an int. I need a start name, because if the file doesn't exist, I need to put a starting name in there. I don't want it to be null. So I'm just going to put nobody has has a high score with a score of 0. Once the user plays the game, whoever's first to do it will definitely get that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a try catch block or try catch statement. Trying to put in those curly braces. There we go. And we'll do catch here. All right. Perfect. So we're going to try our code, and then if the code doesn't work, we're going to catch it. We definitely want to catch that error if our try code doesn't work. So let's write that try code. We're going to use the keyword using. Using does a couple things. The one thing it does, it prevents us from having to type it at the very top, but more importantly, it will close the file once we're done with it. So I'm going to take full advantage of that. So using system.io, what am I using from the input output? That is the stream reader, and I give it a name. Reader sounds like a good one to do. That is a new system.io.stream reader, and right here is the name of my file. I'm calling mine highscore.txt. Now notice we have a red line here. If I put a semicolon, it will accept it, and it turns green. But here's the issue, and this is why it's so important you understand your code. If I try to get the name and I do reader, it keeps changing it to data table reader. But if I get rid of that semicolon and I do name equals reader dot read line, now I'm able to actually read the line, and then that semicolon error that we had earlier is gone. Now, the one thing I forgot to say when we started using the keyword using is you want to put open and close curly braces. And that is because if we're reading multiple lines, we need an open and closed curly brace. If we do not have that, it's only going to work for one line. Well, we have to read multiple lines. So the next one I need is score file. Well, that's going to be reader.read line. The next thing I need to do is I need to go ahead and put that in score. So what I need to do is I need to do int.parse. Now, you can do an if statement with a try parse and handle the error accordingly, but we only have 2 lines here. We know it's always going to be an integer, so it's going to be okay. So we're going to do int.parse. What are we converting to an int? That is score file. I put my semicolon. Now that I have the name and I have the score, I can go ahead and output that in a message box. So message box.show high score of. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to put in, let's see here, the name. Or actually, the name isn't the high score. We're going to do score is held by, and then we're going to put the name. There we go. So high score of whatever it is held by, and then the name. Make sure you put spaces so it looks professional. So that's for the try statement. Now, if that try statement doesn't work, I want to put that outside the using. There we go. Because I'm not using the message box with that, so I want to keep my code organized. Now, if that doesn't work, if the file highscore.txt doesn't exist, we need to run this catch statement, which will actually create the file, not using stream reader, but a stream writer. Okay, so we're going to do our catch statement. Let's go ahead, let's move this curly brace so it lines up with the open curly brace for using. That's just so if we need to change anything later on, it will work. We're going to use that keyword using again. And all we're going to do is system.io.streamWriter. What's a good name for that stream writer? How about writer? Equals new system.io.streamWriter. Then I got to use the file name. Now, it's very important we name it the same thing that we're trying to open. If I do this, highscore.txt, that's going to create a major issue because a capital H doesn't have the same ASCII code value as a lowercase h. It's not going to be able to find it. So my advice is anytime you're doing files, just keep it all lowercase so you don't have to account for anything later on. We're going to put that semicolon to get rid of that error temporarily. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to do writer. Well, I got to get rid of that semicolon so I can actually do it. I want to open and close those curly braces for this using block because I'm writing more than one line. Writer dot write line. And what are we writing? Well, we're writing the start name because we got to put in nobody. Now we could just, I guess we could just put in quotes nobody, but we've already created the variables, write line, and then the start score. Now, because that is an integer, we need to convert it to a string. So make sure you have a capital .to. Because we're using the the using right here, when we hit this, it will close the file. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say file not found. File has been created. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this twice. The first time we run it, it should say file not found, file has been created. The second time we click the button, because the file has been created, we should see the name. So let's go ahead and start our program. And all we're going to do is click on View High Score, file not found, file has been created. View high score of 0 is held by nobody. So perfect. So that is doing it every time. If we exit our program and we run it again, it's still going to say high score of 0 because the file has been created. The next thing we need to do is code out that exit button. One line of code in the exit button is simply application, not app context at all, but application .exit. And with that, you'll be able to close the application. So let's run it. Let's click on View High Score, make sure it's still showing us the appropriate message. It is. exit, and we're able to exit the program. What we need to do now is there's a couple things we've done. We need to swing over to form 1. We actually need, at the end of the game, to prevent it from closing the application, what we want to do is we want to pull the high score from the file, create the file if it has not already been created. We do need a try catch statement here, because when the user runs the program for the very first time, maybe they don't click on view high score. Well, if we try to open the file, it's not going to exist. So even inside Snake Eater, where the game actually runs, we're going to need a try catch statement there to create the file if it doesn't work. But we need to read that file, we need to pull the high score, compare it to the new game high score, whichever one's higher, that's what we need to write to the file. Well, we only need to write to the file if the score is actually higher than what's recorded. So let's go ahead and get ready to code that out. So we don't want to put text boxes on our actual form design that we have here. That's going to look a little tacky. So all we're going to do is add another form. So we'll add one to handle the high score, and we only need to call it if the high score, it needs to be updated. So we'll call this update high score. So form update high score, going to add it. Definitely going to shrink it down some. It does not need to be this big, and I'm going to update that text. We're going to need a couple text boxes and a couple labels. So let's fast forward where that is done. So I have a couple labels here. I have one, LBL name, and the text property reads inner name. I have LBL high score. Want to let the user know, hey, you got a new high score. I have a text box. I didn't name this one, so I'm going to do TXT name. And then I have button BTN submit. And when they click the BTN submit button, that's where we're actually going to write to the file. This is where our try catch statement is going to go. I don't want to put a text box and the submit button on our Snake form. It just doesn't look good. Even if we hide it and only show it, we're going to have this open space and it's just not going to look good. So we're just going to create a new form. So let's go ahead and let's double click this submit button and run that try catch statement and talk about how to transfer the score from FRM main over to this form. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a try catch statement. We're going to create a method because we have to get rid of this timer update.stop, this message box.show, application.exit return. What we're going to do instead, well, we're still going to have timer update.stop. We want it to stop, but we need to make sure we don't exit. We still want to show the message they collided with themselves, but then what we need to do is we need to try to open the file, see what the high score is. If there isn't a high score, then our catch statement is going to call that new form and we're going to pass the score. But first things first, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Public void, check high score. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to check the high score here. So right here, I'm going to leave this you collided with yourself, but instead of application.exit return, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment them out for now. I'm going to do check high score. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call check high score. I'm not going to pass a 0 at all. That's a typo. Now I need to go find the other one that says we collided with the wall. That's going to be in our code somewhere. Right here, you collided with the wall. I'm going to simply comment out this application.exit and return, and I'm simply going to do check high score. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to call that method. Down here in my check high score, here it is right here, we're going to use a try catch statement. We need to try to open the file and get the high score. If the file doesn't exist, then we know that it's the first time the high score is being written, so the catch statement is simply going to call the form. Let's go ahead and code that out. All right, we're going to need a couple variables here. The first one is high score. We set that equal to 0. The next thing we need is the name, and we'll call it high name because we need to know who currently holds the high score if they happen not to beat that high score. We're going to need a try catch block. So we're going to go ahead and code those out. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. We're going to use that keyword using. So using system.io.streamReader. Reader is such a good name to use. Equals new system.io.streamReader. Then we need the name of the file we called ours, high score.txt. It is imperative that you call it the same thing. It's also imperative you spell stream reader correctly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do hi name equals, and it has to be in the order that you wrote. We recorded the name followed by the score. It's imperative we stick to that order. So I'm going to do reader.readLine. Now for high score, if I do equals reader dot, oh, I need to use that. I need to use those open and close curly braces so I can use reader on more than one line. Get rid of that one there. There we go. Reader dot read line. You'll notice we have an error here. You'll notice it has an error because it's a string that cannot convert to an int. So all we need to do is do int dot parse, and it'll take that string and it'll convert it to an integer. Because we are writing the file, we know that it's going to need to be an integer. You don't want to compare a string. Well, you can't compare a string and an integer. You shouldn't be doing that anyway. So what we want to do is we want to see if the score is greater than the high score. So we're still inside our catch statement. So if score is greater than high score, well, if it's, yeah, it has to be greater than the high score. We're not going to do if they tie it. You got to beat the high score. So if the score is higher than the score, then we need to call the form. Now, if the file doesn't exist, it's going to go down to this catch statement. And what we want to do is we want to call the form and pass the score. And here we want to call the form and pass the score. So we need to create an instance of the form. We need to call the form, which is frm update high score. But what we need to do is pass the score variable, because we can't access score directly from update high score like we would normally. So all we're going to do is we're going to pass it, and it's going to accept it as a parameter, and then we'll be able to write that once we get the user's name. Let's go ahead and code that out. All right, so let's call the form. Before we do that, remember we need to create an instance of a form. So form update high score, I'll call it simply update equals new form update high score. Now we're going to be passing the score for value. Don't worry about this red line. We'll get rid of that in just a second. So then we're going to do update dot show, and then we're going to do this dot hide. Now what we also need to do is an else statement here. So we do need an else statement, because if they don't get the high score, we need to let them know. So message box.show, you did not beat the high score of, and then let's simply output high score, because they may need to know what they need to beat. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut it down on them. So application.exit, and then return, just to prevent running any other code. Now this form update high score, you'll notice there's a red line here. So we're going to go over to our form update high score, and right here is the error. So we need a parameter here. So I'm going to call it new score. So now when I go back, that red line should be missing. So let's scroll down to our code, and here it is, check high score. You can see that red line is now gone. So if there is no file, then obviously they have the high score. So all we're going to do is we're going to do form update high score. I'm going to do the same thing I just did, because the only way this is going to run is if there's an error. So form update high score. I'm going to pass the score just like I did. I'm going to do update.show, and then I'm going to do this .hide. And then what that's going to do is it's going to call. So the update high score form. So all we need to do now is code out the submit button, where we actually write the name and the score that we passed as the parameter here, new score, to the file, and then we'll be done and we'll be ready to test it out. Okay, inside this button submit, we need to create a string. We're going to call it new name, because we're getting a new name from the user. Now, we need to see if that text box is null or white space. So we're going to say is null or white space, because maybe they put in a bunch of spaces, and we're checking that text box txt name dot text, which is the text. If that is the case, we're going to do message box.show, and we're going to say enter a value. Then what we're going to do is we're going to type in return, which will exit the method. Now, if that's not the case, then we don't need an else statement here, because if that's not the case, the rest of the code is going to run. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that using system.io.streamWriter. I'm going to call it writer equals new system.io, just like we did earlier, stream writer. We called it highscore.txt. I'm going to put open and close those curly braces. That's a thing of quotes, not curly braces at all. Now, what we need to do is we're going to do writer.writeLine, and I'm going to write a new name. And then I'm going to do writer.writeLine. Now, this one is can be a little tricky at first. If I do new score.toString, it's going to tell me that we can't do that. It's going to say that it's not defined because it's in the parameter up here. It's inside the constructor. So what we need to do is we need to create a variable here. So I'll call it int, we'll say high score equals 0. Then right here, after we initialize the component, I can do high score equals new score. So now whatever the parameter is has been passed to high score. And then down here, I can change this to high score. And that will be able to convert it to a string. After I do this, this close curly brace will close the file. But I'm going to do message box.show high score recorded. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do this .hide, and we're going to go back to the main menu, and we're going to do frm main menu .show. So, not form main menu .show. Let's see here. Because we got to create an instance of that. So what we're going to do is before we hide this, we're going to do frm main menu, and we'll call it menu equals new for main menu, and then we can do menu dot show. There we go. And now we can call that main menu. So let's go ahead and save. Let's go ahead and run this and see how it works. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we have it. We view the high score. High score is 0, held by nobody. So I'm going to move along, and we'll get a score of 1, or a score of 2 or whatever, and then we'll lose the game. I want to get a couple points here, because remember, we deduct points if we move too many times. We start to lose points. Okay, 5 is good. Okay, so game over. You collided with the wall. The score is 5. That's what needs to be recorded. I hit OK. New high score. Enter name. Herb Computer Science. We hit submit. High score recorded. We're back at the main menu. If we click on view high score, we should see Herb Computer Science with a high score of 5. I click on view high score. High score of 5 is held by. Now it's not recording the name, so let's find out what's going on there, because it's not recording or showing the name. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we wrote the name. We did right here. So let's go back to our main menu. Let's click on view high score and find out what's going on here. So it turns out we never took what was inside the text name text box and assigned it to new name. So we need to do that right here. So we're going to do new name equals txt name dot text. So that should fix the error that we have. So let's run it again. And this is why you always want to test your code and, view high score. Okay, it's still blank. So let's get a new high score. Let's get 6 here. Actually, let's get 1 or 0 to make sure nothing happens. Game over, you collided with the wall. You did not beat the high score of 5, and it exits. Perfect. So we know that is working. So let's beat 5. so we can get a high score. And then, now that we've actually taken what is inside the text box and put it in a variable, it should output it this time with no problem, because there'll be actually a value there. So of course it wants to be in the corner. I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. So let's try this one more time. Getting stuck in the corner is not where you want to be, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to hit it fast enough. There we go. So 3, of course, right here at the very top. Okay, able to get it. And then this one right here, 5, and then 6. Perfect. And we hit the wall. We have 6. New high score. Okay, so now Herb Computer Science. I hit submit. High score recorded. Perfect. Now view high score. High score of 6 is held by Herb Computer Science. So now that we've actually taken what's inside the text box and put it inside the variable, we can write it to the file. Hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to help the channel grow. And we'll see you guys in the next programming video.